Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I think we'll just wait for 30 more seconds or so before we begin. Okay, I think we can start now. Okay, hi everyone. I'd like to introduce you to our Pearson Edexcel Project Qualification Chief Examiner, Dr. John Taylor today. John will be taking you through a short training session on the new Express approach to delivering our Level 1, 2 and 3 project qualification. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end of the session, so please use the questions functionality on your GoToWebinar toolbar to add your questions and ideas, or just say hello. And we'll do our best to answer those whilst everything's going and John's got time for questions. If not, we'll follow up straight away after with some answers to your questions. We are recording this session, so we will send that recording through to you afterwards, but we will be respecting your privacy, so we won't be reading out any names when we respond to your questions. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to John to begin the training.
Thank you, Christian, and hello. Great to have you joining us. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so just giving you an overview of the Express approach to project qualifications with Pearson. I'm not going to assume you are already familiar with either the extended project or the foundation higher project qualifications, but I'll give you a little bit of background on those and then explain to you why we've taken the step of proposing that these are done as express qualifications. This is an obvious response to the circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment, where so many learners have had opportunities for their learning to be accredited by means of exams cancelled, and they find themselves in the space of weeks or even some months left in the academic year. And we thought this was a fantastic opportunity to engage in more project work. And as I'll explain, the project qualifications have been going for a number of years and are well established within the qualification system. And so the opportunity arose to put out a model where we do one of these instead of over a period of maybe a year or 6 months, but we really go for it in an intense, focused way over a period of about 3 months to try and complete a full project qualification. And it's early days, obviously, but I know, speaking with my own hat on as someone who teaches this as well as an assessor, my students have responded incredibly enthusiastically. I've seen some really lovely project work emerging already, and it's really great for them to have an opportunity to engage in a meaningful challenge at a time when their normal academic programs have been so interrupted. So if I can get my slides to operate, we're going to do an overview briefly of the project qualifications, and then I'll say a few words about support that's available, the mentoring process, how we should go about supporting our learners, and that will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure, if you've had experience in project work. But some of the groundwork there, some of the basic principles of how to be a good mentor. And then we'll pause for some Q&A, because I'm sure this will be generating a lot of questions in your mind already. And then in the last few minutes, I want to give you details of some of the excellent new resources which have been made available in recent weeks through the Pearson website to support you and your learners directly with all aspects of the project process. So that's teaching and assessment. We've got some terrific new material that's just and more to come as well. So I'll say a little bit about that in the final few minutes. Okay, so an overview to begin with of the Express qualification. So the first point to notice is that the Express project is in all major points the same as the from foundation, higher or extended projects with which you may be familiar. If you're not familiar, let me just briefly say a little bit about those. The project qualifications began about 10 years ago, and they were designed as complementary qualifications to sit alongside the other qualifications that your learners might be doing, whether that's GCSE, IGCSE, A-level, International A-level, BTEC, whatever qualifications they're doing. We felt there was the opportunity for learners to engage in a significant project which would gain them credit as an extra qualification alongside their other learning. The A-level standard extended project, so this would be for level 3 learners, typically aged 16 to 19, is a 120-hour project, of which we think about 40 hours would be spent in guided learning through teaching, and then the project itself would take around about 80 hours for the learners. The higher and foundation projects, probably less well known than the extended project. Higher and foundation projects correspond to what used to be called the higher and foundation tiers of GCSE or IGCSE. If you remember back to about 4 or 5 years ago when the GCSEs and IGCSEs were still tiered, we would normally expect that learners who were at the higher end of the spectrum would access higher tier GCSE. That would correspond to grades A star to C, or as they now are, grades 9 down to 4. And then the lower tier GCSE foundation tier corresponds to grades 1 to 3, or in the old grades D to F. So that would what that means is that as well as our reasonably well-known A-level extended project, which is a great qualification for learners moving on towards university as a preparation for independent learning in a university setting, as well as the A-level extended project, we've got these smaller scale qualifications for GCSE level learners, typically aged 13, 14, 15, although potentially accessible a little bit younger as well at the foundation tier if you've got an able cohort. And the foundation and higher projects are, roughly speaking, half the size of a GCSE in terms of their size and in terms of the demand on the learners. And we would expect that they would take around about 60 hours in total, of which 20 would be teaching and 40 hours would be spent on the project. Now, you may be thinking that sounds like a lot of hours to fit into 3 months. And of course it would be if we were on a normal timetable. But what we're envisaging is that learners could engage in the process of doing their project as their main mode of learning if everything else in their timetable has fallen away. So it's realistic over a period of 3 months, if you're working at the rate of maybe a couple of hours a day to produce one of these projects. So that's the little bit of background on projects, and as I've said, the aim of the extended program, the Express program, is to do this within a much more focused time frame. And let me just say a word or two about how that would work. I've already said that it would require obviously more hours per day than learners would normally have available, but given the circumstances, I hope that might be realistic. Another point is that we need learners to be quite specific and quite focused in their choice of objectives. So a project is quite open-ended by its nature, and if they're going to move quite quickly through this process, they need to decide quite quickly, quite early on, what their main objectives are going to be, and we would expect them to maybe pick 2 or 3 major objectives which they can define and quite specifically so as to get quite briskly into the learning process. Just a couple of other general points about the project. We've emphasised that one of the central principles of project work, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment, is learner choice. Projects require learners to make their own choice about the objectives of their work and the questions and the challenges that they're setting them for themselves. So we really do see this as a chance for them to learn independently, to become independent learners. But at the same time, we know that they require assistance and guidance and support. And so we assume that they will work with a mentor, probably a teacher, or it could be assisted by a parent. And the mentor will be facilitating the process, not guiding and directing it all, but facilitating. So that means providing questions, challenges, support, pointing them towards resources that they can access, helping them to understand the ways in which they should address the assessment objectives, and so on. Another central point about the project, which is important just from the outset to be clear about, is that it's not just a big essay. I mean, students can write dissertations, that's one of the units for the extended project, but we want to see learners embrace a whole variety of outcome types. So that will include performance work, it will include creative work, which could be digital, it could be art, it could be design, it could be it could range as far as video making or filming. It's really very open-ended, and if it's a meaningful challenge which can follow through a process of setting objectives, researching, developing and reviewing, then it will work as a project. And we might want to explore that a little bit more when we get to Q&A. So I've emphasized that the point of the Express project is to manage this process within a focused period of time. So as I've suggested, that really means being quite clear with learners that they achieve a very specific design brief fairly early on in the process, and that they choose realistic, specific but realistic timescales. So the project breaks down, as I've said, into an 80-hour process if it's at level 3, that's the extended project, or a 40-hour process if it's at level 1 or 2, the foundation and the higher projects. So that we'll need to discuss with the learners how they're going to plan out their time in order to meet the assessment objectives within that time frame. And if you look later on the website, you'll see that there's a scheme of work and there's some recommendations there for what stage learners will get to over let's say a 12-week period, a 3-month period, how far they need to be through the process at different stages. Okay, so there's a little bit of an introduction. I appreciate I've covered a huge amount there in the space of 15 minutes, so please do type in questions and I'll pause in a moment to take some of those. But let me just say a few words as well about project mentoring. I've said already that the point of project work is to enable learners to become independent. And I do emphasize that it's a matter of becoming independent. Independent learning is not an innate skill. It's not something that all learners can just do naturally. They need to be taught the skills that go into successful project work. So some of the teaching that we'll need to engage in is just that. It's about how do you structure a project? How do you reference your sources? How do you analyze arguments? And you may be thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I haven't got the access to my students at the moment or at the classroom time. How am I going to do that? And I hope you'll find that if you look online, we've created now in the Future Ready microsite, which I'll say more about at the end, we've created a whole suite of resources to provide online support for all parts of the project journey. So there are student webinars, there's mentor guidance, there's scaffolding, structural support for the process, there's a scheme of work that takes you through the different stages, guidance about the expectations, and so on. And so I appreciate the circumstances are far from ideal, but I think that utilizing the online facilities really can make project learning viable at a time when other options are no longer open. Crucial to the project, of course, is the choice of title. And one of the points that we really do emphasize is that a project needs to have a clear, specific focus to it. I mean, I sometimes joke with my students and say, you know, we're not just doing a project like we might have done when we were aged 5 on the Egyptians or the Vikings or the Romans. This is a much more developed piece of project work, and it will need to have a central question, or a central practical challenge. So the question would be the focus for a dissertation or investigative style of project, where the learner is going to go on a journey of inquiry in order to address that question. An example might be, should we do more about the safety of drivers in Formula One? Now, that's a very specific question. You can research that, you can argue for and against. So that would be an example of a good title for a level 3 project. As well as questions, though, sometimes learners are working in a practical mode, as I've suggested. They could do art, design, creative work. They could put on a performance. And in these cases, it's probably more appropriate for them to make their title in the form of a practical challenge. So, for example, they might be concerned about e-safety, and they might want to make a video for their friends to explore the topic of e-safety. So that would be a good title for a project, actually, and then that one could probably be done at level 2, level 3, possibly even level 1. Can I make a video to educate young people about e-safety? So you see, we want them to have a very specific, focused title. And obviously that won't come immediately. It takes a process of negotiation and discussion. We've already created resources on the Future Ready website to help with this. But almost certainly this would be a point where the mentors will need to be involved in negotiating and helping learners to frame an appropriate title. As well as the title being specific, it matters that the title is open. Occasionally learners choose titles which are narrow in the sense that they lead to a single factual right answer. So for example, suppose that a student was interested in pursuing a career as a physiotherapist, and they picked a title, how can I train to be a physiotherapist? Well, in all honesty, they could probably look up the answer and find it on the right website within a space of an hour or two. That's unlikely to be the starting point for a successful open-ended exploratory project. On the other hand, if they asked a question like, what skills make a physiotherapist successful in their profession, then they've got something which is much more open. And in our experience, it's the open questions, the ones where you can explore it, go down different avenues, argue for and against, find counter arguments. These are the questions that make really successful projects. And that's true whether they're working at level 1, 2, or 3. So all the project qualifications. Look to encourage your learners to pick open questions, questions which will draw them into discussion and debate, analysis, counter argument, challenging alternative viewpoints. These are the projects that lead to the really rich learning journeys. I've mentioned as well that the project process needs a structure to it, that the 80 hours or 40 hours is a large chunk of time. So I would agree, I always agree with my learners to have 4 or 5 milestone points within that process. So an example might be that after 5 hours of work, I'd expect them to have proposed their question, and we have a form for them to fill out, the project proposal form to do that. Maybe after 20 hours into the project, they'll have conducted their initial research, and then the next milestone might be at, say, 50 hours to have drafted the first draft of the entire project, leaving a further 20 hours for editing and reviewing, and a final 10 hours for polishing it and conducting the final presentation. I haven't mentioned presentations yet. Presentations are expected at level 3. They're not necessarily, though, required at level 1 or 2. So if your learners are doing an extended project, they should do a presentation, but the foundation and higher projects don't need to, although they still could if they chose to. And one of the points I make about presentations is, again, you might be thinking, oh, well, how can we possibly do that when they're remote? But actually, online presentation works perfectly well if they do a slide share with you and talk through their work, and then maybe you have a face-to-face question and answer session run remotely. That's a perfectly valid way of managing the presentation process. Okay, so I've said a fair bit. There's lots more I could say. We're covering a huge amount of ground in a fairly short space of time. So let me pause at this point and ask Christian, have we had any questions come in yet that we could take? And if you've got questions, now would be a good time as well to type them in so we can address some of them before I go on to look at resources in a little while.
Okay, I think we've got 5 or 6 questions so far, so I'll just read as many as you like. The first one is this project valid for international GCSE level?
Yes, so the project is available as a standalone qualification. So it's not tied to any other particular qualification. So if your learners are doing IGCSEs, they would be able to do the level 1 or level 2 project, the foundation or higher project, alongside their IGCSEs. So it's a supplementary or complementary qualification that is designed to extend their learning into new areas. And yes, it's available as part of the, in this country, it's a regulated qualification by our regulated body Ofqual. And it's now available. It is available. Has been available for a few years actually internationally. I should say, by the way, some of you may be thinking, well, I thought that the level 1 and 2 projects had stopped, and there was a hiatus when there was a brief pause for one cycle, I think, when the previous qualification cycle came to an end. But we've re-begun the foundation and the higher project. They've just been relaunched. So if you were thinking, oh, I thought that had gone away, the answer is yes, it had, but it is now back. It is available, and yes, you could do this alongside any other qualification. So if you're an IGCSE based centre internationally, then you can pick up the higher project as an extra element alongside it.
Okay, this question is quite general. It just asks, how will the project help learners, just in general?
Well, that's a great question, isn't it? How will it help learners? I mean, there's perhaps I think there's probably 2 or 3 areas I'd explore with it on this question. Firstly, and in a rather pragmatic utilitarian way, it does give them another qualification. I mean, obviously, you can do project work with your learners regardless of using the framework of the qualification, but the FBQ, HBQ, EPQ, they're recognized qualifications, they're regulated qualifications. The extended project in particular has been very widely welcomed by universities, mainly for the fairly obvious reason that it prepares learners extremely well for university level study. And what we're finding, particularly if I talk mainly about the UK universities, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is true internationally as well, we're now finding that increasingly the learners who have done an extended project are being given lower offers from the universities in terms of their entrance requirements. I mean, this isn't universal, but it has become more common, and I think it will continue to become more common. And the reason for this is because what learners gain from doing a project is the ability to learn independently. I mean, it helps them enormously when they get off to university or in employment. If they're required to go away and do research tasks, research assignments, if they're required to do presentations, data analysis, any activity which requires critical thinking, research skills, independent learning, these are just tremendous opportunities for them to develop those skills and prepare themselves for that next stage. And if I don't want to be critical of the exam system, because obviously it does a particular task, and in many cases exams function very effectively for what they do. But if I did make a generalization, one thing I would say about examinations is that the mode of learning that goes with many exams is what I would call a right answer mode of learning. In other words, the learner will tend, as a rule, to prepare themselves for the exam by learning what answers are likely to get them marks in that exam, understandably. But of course, life isn't like that. And outside the exam halls, and we all are outside the exam halls at the moment, the exam halls are pretty empty. Outside the exam halls, life is full of these challenging open-ended questions. And so learners who've gained some skills through the project qualification, who've learned how to think for themselves, learned how to learn independently, learned how to look at both sides of an argument and how to access and to bring in research sources to support their own point of view. They're going to be at a huge advantage, both in academic terms and in terms of employability and future skills. So I think the first part of my answer is just that it has enormous value for them as they progress through to the next stage of study or of work. But as well as that, for me, that's a very, very important part of the rationale, but there's another part to it as well. And that's to do with the value of learning where you have freedom of choice. And so many of the assignments that we set for our learners are ones where there isn't free choice. We choose the essay titles, we choose the tasks. And with the best will in the world, it's going to be hard for many learners to be as motivated as they could be when they're given the chance, when the chance to choose for themselves is taken away. But conversely, what I find and what many, many project teachers have found is that when you give learners free choice and when you say to them, look, this is a qualification where you really can follow your interests, follow your heart. If you really want to develop a new skill, if you really want to explore a new area, go for it, make that the focus of your project. Unsurprisingly, A, they enjoy the learning experience more, but B, they do far better quality work. I mean, it's not rocket science that if you're interested in a question and if you've chosen it for yourself, you're likely to do better. And I'm sure that many of us here will have had that experience of working with learners who are struggling to get them motivated. But if you can just find the topic or the question that sparks their interest, then that can become the start of a really fruitful learning journey. So I think those are the main points. First of all, the project qualifications do have a market value, if I can use that phrase. They're recognized qualifications within the qualifications framework, and particularly at level 3 as a progression route into university or employment. The extended project has is very well known and reputable and recognized as a gateway qualification. And the other points, as I said, is that they're extremely good contexts for teaching all of these skills around deeper learning, independent learning, critical thinking, future skills. Fantastic opportunity to do that. And as I said, a great opportunity for learners to simply enjoy the learning process much more. I mean, I was integrally involved right from the start in the development of the project qualifications. And for me, it came out of my own experience working with, talking to learners and just noticing how they lit up as soon as you allowed them scope to ask questions for themselves and to pursue things that genuinely interested them. And really the trick to project learning, successful project learning, is to take that nugget of interest and then turn it into the starting point for a really valuable learning journey. And I know that this approach is sometimes criticized and people think, oh, well, you're dumbing down, but it's not that at all. If you look at our assessment criteria, we're not really going to go into them in depth today, but it's a very, very rigorous model of assessment. And it really does target the development of these project learning skills. So I don't accept at all the argument that this is just a kind of easy route. It starts with interest, but it leads into engagement and deeper learning. And time and again, for many learners, it does turn out to be the most successful part of their project journey. So that was a short but very interesting and good question. Thank you for that. And I hope that enlightens you as regards certainly my own perspective on the value of this. Christian, have we got another question?
We do. We've got several more questions. One here, this may be for Ewan if he turns up in a bit. But it asks, can private students who register themselves from the British Council, can they also do this project?
Right, good question. So we probably do need Ewan's input if he joins us before the end. But I think I will. Have we, Christian? Have we got the opportunity to put an email response back to that particular question as well afterwards, if we need to give more detail? Okay. In that case, what I would say at this point, based on my own understanding, is that the qualification is available to all learners, provided that they work with a Pearson registered centre. That is to say, a Pearson centre that's registered for delivery of Pearson qualifications. So I'm not sure off the top, I don't know myself off the top of my head whether the British Council is a registered centre for delivery of qualifications. If it isn't, then the answer would be that the learner would need to find a centre who was prepared to enter that work as part of their own portfolio of a cohort of students. So that it needs to go through a registered centre, I think, is the bottom line. The other point to bear in mind as well, as I've mentioned, is that it is important that the learner, whilst they work independently, does have access to a project mentor. And the project mentor will need to be involved throughout the project journey, not necessarily intensively at all points, but they will need to be there at the outset when they're choosing a question. They will need to be there to help the learner access some of the guidance around the project learning skills that they need. And they'll need to be there as well, asking questions during the process and checking that the learner is working toward the assessment objectives. And finally, obviously, they'll be involved in assessing the project and observing the presentation. I should say as well, just in case you're new to it, that the project is 100% internally assessed with external moderation. So if you're familiar with coursework, this is a coursework qualification and works along that model.
Next question, is the project recognised by universities and/or employers?
Thank you. So yes is the answer. If I deal with the universities, where I can give you a little bit more detail, first of all, when we developed the project qualifications, and they've been online now for over 10 years, we worked very closely with the end users and particularly with the universities because we wanted to make sure that this would be, as I mentioned, a gateway qualification, that this would really prepare learners for the challenges of study at the next stage if they go on to higher education. And so I was very pleased that when the qualification was launched, it was launched with a very warm response from higher education. And what's happened since then has been that there's been an evolution, I would say, in the understanding of the qualification. In the early days, it wasn't necessarily fully understood or appreciated as a new qualification, but as it's become more mainstream and more widespread, and there are now around 40,000 project qualifications across all the awarding bodies in the UK at the moment, as it's become more mainstream, the universities have grown in their understanding of it and their response to it. So it's extremely common for a university to say, and you can check university web pages for this, it's extremely common for them to say that they will consider and bear in mind the extended project as part of the portfolio of evidence that the student puts forward. And I can't give you chapter and verse for employers, but I would imagine that for people going on to workplace, making job applications for the workplace, the same would be true, because for the obvious reason that the skill set that learners gain from doing a project is so valuable, whether they're going on to higher education or into employment. You know, students who can think for themselves, students who can research, students who can argue critically, students who can persevere over time, students who've learned how to shape and reshape a question. I mean, it's very, very common in a project for the initial question to have to change and to be refined and to be revised, and for the learner to have to regroup a little bit and redevelop their work. You know, these are the skills that make successful learners, whether they're at university or whether they're going on into employment. So what I always encourage my learners to do as part of their progress through from education into higher education or the workplace is to really tell the story through their personal statements and through their application forms of the skills and the abilities that they've acquired through doing their project. And that's very widely recognized as a hugely significant part of the benefit of doing this kind of work. But as well as that, as I mentioned, an increasing proportion, I can't say it's a majority, but it is an increasing proportion of the offers that our learners are getting from universities. These offers are now increasingly ones where they might be given a lower grade if they can do well with their extended project. So, for example, at certain universities in the UK now, they might be given an AAB offer if they can get an A in their EPQ rather than a 3A offer. And I've had learners as well where the discount, if you like, is even greater than that. So that gives you some idea of the value of the qualification. And in terms of its value for workplace, of course, one of the great opportunities is if a learner has done a project which is directly relevant to the industry or the mode of work that they're looking to gain employment in, then that often can be the thing which really opens the door. I mean, to go off to an interview, if you're aiming to be, let's say, a software developer, having done some software development of your own and having got a portfolio of work where you've got a log that shows how you developed it, you've got a record of the research process and the development and all of the technical details there. I mean, that's a fantastic thing to take with you when you go for your interviews. So I think that gives you, again, some idea of why this is so valuable and becoming increasingly recognized as a really significant part of what learners should be engaging with pre-work or pre-university.
Okay, next question. I just should say, John, we've got loads of questions, so I don't know if you
I take the hint. I'll speed up. Let's get through as many as we can. We've got another 20 minutes. We should be able to.
Cool. Where have we got to? This question is this project related to any specific subject like maths, or can there be any type of subject?
Good question. The answer is any subject. You name it, I could probably tell you an EPQ that I've seen or a project that I've seen related to it. All the main requirements are that it should have a specific question or challenge, that there should be a meaningful research process, that the learner should develop their own ideas, and at the end they should review. And as I've already said, it can take the form of a written project or a scientific report or a creative piece of work, whether that's art, design, or performance. And so as long as you can find one of those challenging open-ended questions that's going to lead into discussion and argument and debate, then you can relate this to any topic. Maths, you might think, oh, well, how could we relate it to maths? After all, isn't maths just a right answer subject? There's always a right answer. But there's always room for argument. As soon as you apply maths to the real world, are statistics being used in a misleading way in the media? That's one just off the top of my head. So you could relate or apply maths to a practical challenge. Could you work out whether or not the average growth the average growth of students in your school has changed over the past 10 years? You could do all kinds of work applying mathematics. So pretty much any topic, any project. The key is, as I've said, that it's got to have that open-ended quality. And the other key is that it's got to be something that the learner themselves wants to ask, because it has to start with them. But yes, any topic.
Okay, the next question is, can you do the extended project if you have not done level 1 and level 2?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't clear about that. They are hierarchical, and I have got learners who progress through from lower to higher tiers, or will be doing, but there's absolutely no requirement. The foundation and higher tier are valuable if you can put them in place in your centre as starting points, because you can build those skills early. But at the moment, it's by far the majority of learners who encounter this mainly at level 3 at the extended project stage. That's where most of our entries come from. But over time, I suspect that will change as more centres become aware of the opportunity of doing foundation and higher tier work. But yes, there's no requirement to have done the lower levels.
Next question, can students work in groups?
Yes, thank you. That's an excellent question. We do see group work. It's fairly common in the case of performance work, where unless they're maybe playing Hamlet and doing a soliloquy, they're almost certainly going to be working as part of a cast, and therefore it's a group project. It's less common, I'll be honest, it's less common for written projects to be group projects, although it's not impossible, but there are obvious challenges in getting that to work. Let me just say a little bit about group projects, because they do occur and it's important that they're done the right way. The first point that's important with a group project is that each of the learners needs to be able to access each of the assessment areas. So I've said we're not really going into depth on the assessment objectives, but very briefly, the assessment objectives are planning, researching, developing, and reviewing. So a learner will be marked usually around about 15% of the marks, 17% of the marks for their planning, about 20% of the marks for their research, 40% 40 to 44% for the development of their ideas and their work, and then around about 17%, 20% for the review. And each of the learners, if they're engaged in a group, they need to do a little bit of each of those. In other words, they can't sort of devolve the group out so that one student does all the research and another person does all the development. Everybody in the group needs to have the opportunity to do some planning, some research, some development and review. And the other key point is that when it comes to assessing at the end, it needs to be really clear who did what. So the safest and easiest way to do that is for them to keep their own written records and their own logs and have their own proposal forms. I have had learners where there's a group project where they've actually collaborated on a single document. Obviously, that's getting easier to do with technology, and that's fine, provided that they make it clear what their own individual contributions were. And the easiest way to do that is just to color code the work so that one student is, say, red, another student is green, and we can tell at the end who did what, because after all, we have to be able to mark it. So group work, yes, definitely, but just make sure that all learners can access all the assessment objectives, and make sure as well that it's really clear when you're marking who did which bits, so that each of them can get their own mark.
Okay, next one. Will the express option continue when schools reopen?
Great question. I think the answer to that is yes, actually. I mean, I should say, to clarify, the express option isn't a new qualification in the sense that it'll make any difference when you're entering learners. It's essentially a way. What we've done is we've essentially badged this as a route that your learners can follow, and there's no reason, therefore, once we come out of lockdown and we're back to normal, and hopefully the not too far distant future, no reason why you can't continue to use it. And an obvious example would be if you've got high ability learners who are maybe going to be very busy with their academic program. I'm thinking of some of my own students at the moment who've done some of this work prior to starting their A-levels, and this is for them. This is the opportunity just to do one of these, as it were, out of the way, get it out of the way, and then get on with their other courses. So the answer is yes, this will still be available, and really it's your choice whether you use a shorter, more intense time scale and spend more time on the projects to get them done, or whether you elongate the process and maybe work at the rate of an hour or two a week over maybe 5 or 6 months. So yes, the option will still be there in the future.
Next one, can you start the higher or foundation level after starting the project?
Yes, that's a good question, actually. Yes, you can. I can see why you've asked that. Good question. Yes, I can see that you might well be sort of starting off and thinking, is this level 1, is it level 2? The assessment objectives for level 1 and level 2 are very similar indeed, and there's in fact at the top level they're identical, and even at the level of the detail there's only a matter of wording really that makes a difference. So the main differences are scale and level of ideas. Roughly speaking, a level 1 project would typically be about 1,500 words, and a level 2 project would typically be about 2,500 words. So you might well want to start them off on their project, fill out the forms. They start with a proposal form, they go on to an activity log, and they start writing their project or producing their slides if they're working on slides. You could then make the decision about whether that's going to be ranked as a level 2, or whether it's better to enter it as level 1 some way into the process. It wouldn't make much difference in the early phase. You probably need to decide before the end, because there are some slight differences in the expectations if they're going for level 2. But yes, you don't need to make that decision right at the outset.
Okay, next one, let's just find it. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. How is the work assessed? Is there a certificate at the end?
Yes, there is a certificate, and the work is assessed by means of, as I've said, teacher assessment, and then work is sent off to the exam board. We have a process of moderation and sampling in order to just check the grades, and then that then leads to a certificate, just like any other IGCSE or international A-level or A-level GCSE qualification. It's largely the same process, just in this case, we begin with teacher assessment, and then we have external checks on that. I should say as well, if you're wondering about the dates, it's available at the moment. All qualifications are available in the summer series, which usually has a May the 15th deadline, and then certificates are awarded in the middle of August. The level 3 is available in January as well, with an entry date. The deadline for marks to be put in is January the 10th, I think, and certificates are issued in about March. We are looking at this consideration of whether level 1 and level 2 will also be available in January. That's not the case at the moment, but that is under consideration.
Thanks, John. Just to say, we've got Ewan here now. So if you want him to answer that question about the British Council, now's the time. I can unmute him.
Yes, please. Yeah. Hi, Ewan.
Hi, Ewan. I've just unmuted you.
Thanks. Sorry. Yeah, it appears I logged in initially as Alicia.
Yeah.
So I've been in. I heard your British Council question, but I obviously wasn't in as me. Just input. I think the two, I guess, that I can help with. You were definitely right on both of those in terms of the level 3 and the express version of it happening. Will that continue to happen after schools are open? Yeah, John, what you said is completely correct. From what I understand, with what John is planning on doing, all of the materials will still be online for the Express EPQ, so people will still be able to do that. And in terms of the British Council as well, you were correct in what you surmised in the fact that a candidate really need to go to find a centre who is willing to allow them to enter their work through that. That's just because the British Council doesn't really get involved in things like moderation when it comes to coursework. They are an exam centre. It could be that if you explained, if the person who's interested in doing this explained it to the British Council what they're hoping to do, they might look into it. But I would think with the way the British Council normally works, they would not take it on because it is sort of more that moderation aspect. So it would be best to find a centre who is willing to act as that project lead for them.
Great, thank you, Ewan. Well, I've just seen you mute yourself. Yeah, thank you. Question here: can projects be carried over to research topics at university?
Good question. I don't. The answer is in principle. I see no reason why they wouldn't. All I would say is there's an obvious point which we do make, and in fact is part of what candidates have to sign when they enter the qualification. They have to sign to say that this is work. The work that they're submitting hasn't been submitted for another qualification. So I think any university would have the same expectation that if they've looked at a topic at extended project stage, the university wouldn't want them to literally take word for word what they'd written. But on the other hand, that work could well be the starting point and provide them with the basis of knowledge, which they then further explored in a university piece of work. And in fact, I know of, think of at least one of my learners where exactly that happened. So I think the answer is you obviously can't resubmit exactly the same piece of work, but nothing at all to stop you from using your knowledge and the skills you've gained through EPQ and then redeveloping that in the context of another assignment. And when we developed it, we discussed this question. I remember it being discussed when the qualification was developed. And the answer we came up with is that this is exactly how people work in the real world. Researchers develop their knowledge and then they express it in lots of different ways. So I think that model would apply here.
Okay, next question. Is this project an extension of international GCSE or AS A-level curriculum? If so, what are the advantages of this project?
Yes, I think it's exactly the right way to look at it. It's an extension of the curriculum. I mean, it's most obvious when we call it the extended project. It's designed to extend learners into new areas, to allow them to acquire new skills, to allow them to engage with their learning in a different way. And so, they may well take a topic that they've encountered within the curriculum and think, oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to research that more. and that could become the starting point for an extended project. The value of it is, I think, what I was describing earlier, namely that because they're assessed on the process of constructing their project, we do look obviously at the outcome, but when we're looking at the outcome, we're really interested in the skills that they've developed. We're really interested in the quality of engagement with the project learning process. Then this becomes the context within which all of those valuable skills for the future, the critical thinking, the independence, the creativity, perseverance, resilience, all these things that people talk about all the time as desirable attributes. This is just such a wonderful setting for teaching those skills and then for accrediting them and assessing them. And I say I don't want to be critical of exams, but it is fair to say that the examination systems are probably mainly geared towards assessing content knowledge and ability to respond to very specific challenges, whereas project work takes you into this domain of open-ended questioning, critical thinking, analysis, argument, counter-argument, all those things which equip you for the many challenges that lie ahead. So I think I would again just say the value of this is in the way it enriches the entire learning program that we're offering to students.
Okay, next question. Can you moderate at any time of the year or just at the end of any academic year or summer session in May/June?
Yes, correct. It's that was actually, there was an ambiguity in that question. If the external moderation happens in the summer series, and at the moment for level 3, it also happens in January. Internal moderation could happen at any point. The obvious thing to do would be to set your timetable up and then have a moderation window at the end of whenever your project series is. So if, for example, you're doing express projects now and ending in early September, let's say, with your learners, September, October, you'd probably be looking to moderate them at that stage, which then may leave you a gap before they're actually submitted for external moderation. But yes, the external moderation windows are the summer, or in the case of level 3, also January.
John, just to say, we've got 5 minutes left, so I don't know if you want to carry on with the presentation that you've got, or carry on answering questions.
Shall we, yeah, thank you very much for that, Christian. Shall I cover the rest of the slides, and if that does leave us a minute or two, we can tackle more questions, and then apologies if your question hasn't been answered, but we'll endeavour to get back to you with written responses if your question didn't come up. But yes, let me make sure that we have covered everything. So I have alluded to really all of this, but just so you're aware of the details, we've been busily expanding the provision at the moment, and the opportunities are there for specific training online. If you go to the Training for Pearson website and then look for pre-recorded training, you will find, I hope, a very useful set of recordings from myself and my colleagues on the senior assessment team, in which we work our way through the assessment criteria, explain the model of assessment, and then go through the application of the marking grids to exemplar pieces of work. So that's probably a very useful place to start, because it can often make the whole idea of projects very specific and very concrete quite quickly once you've seen what they look like and how they're marked. So training opportunities there. And as I've also mentioned, we have extensive online resources freely available. So have a look at the Pearson Qualifications website. It's a, dare I say, a large and quite complicated website with enormous amounts there, but probably the place to begin would be to follow the links here. Have a look under course materials, and then have a look under the teaching and learning materials section, where you'll find more exemplars, some guidance documents for students, and some assessment guidance, and further, as I say, further exemplar work. Also, very excitingly, we've just launched the Future Ready website, linked there, with specific details on the Project Express, a whole package of skills-focused material for employability. If you're really keen on developing your employability curriculum, go and have a good look at the Employability EPQ, a whole program that we've developed for building employability skills around EPQ. And as I'm sure you're aware, because I've said it multiple times during this session, we think that EPQ really does deliver on the employability skills agenda. Very exciting as well that we've been in partnership with Access Ed, a company that offers free, is offering through the Pearson website, free webinars direct to learner, taking them through all stages of the research and project writing process. So particularly for dissertation learners, there's a whole series, I think we've got 2 or 3 of them up already and more coming. Free webinars, 30-minute webinars, taking them through all those really important research skills. So if you're worried that how am I going to find time to teach this? The answer is a huge amount is already available for you for free. I've recorded recently a series of guidance videos in which I go through the principles that I've been talking about in a little bit more detail. I think there's 9 or 10 of those available on the website and on YouTube. So if you come away from this session and think, well, that sounds exciting, but how are my colleagues going to get used to it? That will be the place for them to start. 5-minute videos, taking them through each stage of what it is to be a good project mentor. We've included as well a really exciting series called the Future Ready Podcasts, discussing, myself and others discussing educational issues, project work, but also spanning into different areas of contemporary concern. And finally, there's an online toolkit which you can download, packed full of more free resources, templates for organizing the projects, checklists for checking the different stages of the process. There's a guidance on delivering project learning remotely, a document that takes you through the process of setting it up online if you're not familiar with that. I guess by now most of us have had to become pretty familiar with that process. And I should say as well, in the Project Express, if you dig into the Project Express section of the Future Ready site, you'll also find a very detailed scheme of work that we've just published. I know how popular schemes of work are. Go and have a look at that. It takes you through everything you need to know about how to run your Project Express program, and there's a whole bunch of hyperlinks to all the resources. So that would be another great place to start searching if you're keen to get going with the teaching of an Express EPQ. There's a link there that you'll get. I think you'll be sent the slides after this session with if you need contact or further support, and a reference as well to the other materials that are available on the project website. Great, it's 10 o'clock. Apologies, as I say, if we haven't had time to take your question, but we will endeavour to get some written responses to you. As you'll appreciate, I'm enormously enthusiastic about all this and have been for the last 10, 15 years and still are. So I hope you share my enthusiasm after today's session and have a wonderful experience with Express Projects.
Great, thanks, John. Just say yes, any questions that we haven't managed to answer, we've got all of those saved, so we will be able to answer those on email. So yes, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for joining.